So Konami put out a new video promoting the TurboGrafx 16, and while there isn't any news here, no new games announced, it is a good look at the console and how Konami plans to market it. I haven't spoken to this before. There are a lot of guys on YouTube who know a ton about TurboGrafx, are collecting it, all of this. I'm not as deep into TurboGrafx, but it has a special place, nostalgically for me. As a kid, I played it a lot, but I was pretty young and I only had a few games available to me. So I was never familiar with the whole library of the TurboGrafx 16. I didn't know anything about the PC Engine or its hundreds of shoot 'em ups. So I missed out on a lot of this stuff. So of all the mini consoles that have been released, this one is actually the most exciting to me because it gives me a chance to revisit a console that, yeah, you can collect it, but that's pretty expensive. And I really like being able to play stuff on modern TVs. It's been said before, there'll always be a place for original hardware. But for me, I've got an OLED television, a modern sound system, and I'm trying to have a nice looking living room. I don't really want to go and set up, a PVM or an old CRT. It just, it's cool if you're into that, but it isn't really for me. So a mini console with 720p graphics, that's great. I love the NES and SNES classics. Got the Sega Mini on the way, and this is really going to round it out for me. And nothing says late 80s like the bright orange and burnt orange and bright green color scheme. I love it. I think it's awesome. Now, the PC Engine version, right, the Japanese version, was shaped a little bit more sensibly. The TurboGrafx is huge, and I've read that was actually just a marketing decision. They wanted to make it large so it would appeal to an American audience. Apparently, we're all fat and love huge things. But you know what? It worked because the TurboGrafx, I think, looks super cool, even if it is just a big plastic case.
57 popular titles, it will be re-released in a mini size. Next, for the title lineup.
This is where I depart a little bit with the hype train. The TurboGrafx includes the PC Engine games in Japanese and the TurboGrafx games in, of course, English. It has more PC Engine games than TurboGrafx, and a lot of the PC Engine games are text-based games that you're not going to be able to play if you don't know Japanese. And I guess if the alternative was just not including those games at all for the American audience or the Western audience, then I guess it's a win. But it just feels kind of cheap to have games on a console that are basically unplayable. It would have been awesome if they had announced that they translated these games. I can't even imagine that'd be that big of a project, but who knows?
Alien Crush.
So I never played Alien Crush or Devil's Crush, but I know they're well renowned. I'm looking forward to playing Alien Crush for the first time. When this was announced, this was part of the first 6 games that they listed publicly for the TurboGrafx Mini. And everybody would say, well, that's great, but surely they're going to do Devil's Crush in a follow-up announcement. And it never came. There is no Devil's Crush on the TurboGrafx Mini. Everyone prefers it. It's more critically acclaimed than Alien Crush. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Again, what do I know? I haven't played either of them. I'm just happy, to be able to play Alien Crush for the first time. But that seems lame to me. They're both Konami games. They could have put the ROM on for both games. Instead, they picked one, and they picked the one that's a little less popular. I don't get what they were thinking. I can't wait to play this game. I know it's well regarded. I installed Space Force or Space Mega Force on my Super Nintendo Mini, which is a similar shoot 'em up, and that game's fantastic. So really excited to play this on the OG shoot 'em up hardware, the TurboGrafx 16.
Dungeon Explorer. An action role-playing game in which you explore dungeons using potions and magic. Moto Roader. Using the multi-tap, you can race against 4 other players at the same time.
Is anybody actually going to buy that multi-tap? Don't get me wrong, I think it's awesome that they're producing it, But when you add up the cost of the controllers, the console for $100 only comes with one controller. The extra controllers are, I think, $25. The multi-tap is $25. You're in for a lot of money if you want a 4-controller setup for your TurboGrafx Mini.
Power Golf. This golf game from the Power Sports series can be played by up to 3 people.
How disappointed were people, especially like the boomers, when they would have bought this in the late 80s? You know, older guys, the Power Golf artwork looks like, you know, obviously it's just a photograph. It looks great, lots of colors, and then you play the game. Didn't we learn our lesson from overly ambitious artwork for a gaming system or a game from the Atari timeline? Apparently not.
A detective action-adventure game with a strange line of humor. The stages are harder to clear than you think. Military Madness.
That's a pretty weak promotional tagline, that the stages are, they're a little bit tougher, a little bit more challenging than you originally envisioned. I don't know, it doesn't sound that exciting, but I have heard good things about JJ and Jeff. Definitely looking forward to checking it out. Military Madness, I'm really excited for.
Head for base Nectaris and save the Earth in this hex map turn-based strategy game. NEUTOPIA, an overhead action role-playing game in which the hero Frey goes on an adventure to get back the princess and 8 medallions.
Obligatory Zelda knockoff, but you know what? I'm not mad about it. This game is well regarded. Again, I completely missed out on it. I'm a total noob to TurboGrafx other than a handful of games I played as a kid, but I can't wait to check this out. Obviously, everybody loves Zelda, and you know, people regard this as a good game.
Psychosis. Battle against the devil trying to take control of your soul in this scrolling shoot-'em-up game.
TurboGrafx games were so heavy. The devil's trying to take control of your soul. I mean, you had Alex the Kid on Sega and Mario on Nintendo at the time, and it was just so like family friendly. It just, TurboGrafx went hard. It's so extreme. I think that's what was so cool about it. You know, when I was younger, it was just this revelatory console. You know, it just seemed extreme. It was more gruesome than stuff you'd seen on other games, with stuff like Splatterhouse. It's just hardcore.
Space Harrier, a thrilling 3D perspective scaling action shooting game ported from the arcade.
I love Space Harrier. When I used to play Shenmue on Dreamcast, I probably spent a good chunk of 10-20% of my time in that game just throwing quarters at Space Harrier in the arcade. I think this game's awesome. It's so simple, but it's timeless. I love how the difficulty scales with each level. It just consistently gets a little bit harder until it's completely overwhelming. This game is so sweet.
Splatterhouse.
What?
Splatterhouse.
What?
Splatterhouse.
Okay!
In this horror action beat-em-up game, the objective is to rescue your girlfriend, Jennifer.
All right, they're underselling this. I mean, this was the seminal horror game from the 16-bit era. As a kid, this thing was terrifying. Got a little older, went back and played it, beat the game finally. It's so fun. The gameplay's addictive. It's challenging. It's not at all cheap. There's, you know, it had branching paths to get to the end of the level on some of the levels, which was novel at the time. But it was the imagery and the music that was so cool. Now, yeah, it unabashedly rips off Friday the 13th, but you know what? This is pretty hardcore. I wouldn't mind seeing a Splatterhouse movie. You know, it's its own mythos. It's pretty cool. And I've played Splatterhouse 2 and 3 a bit, not as much as 1. 2 and 3 coming out later on the Sega Genesis. And you know what? They were cool. They had great artwork in their own right. They had interesting gameplay concepts, especially with Splatterhouse 3. But not comparable to me to the original Splatterhouse. This was not on the TurboGrafx Mini when they first announced it. They first announced, I think, 50 games. That was the total list. And fans were so outraged, they came back and finally, I think, gave in and gave you a few more games. Now, maybe that was the whole thing was just a marketing exercise, but I don't think it was. I think they genuinely were done with the game list at 50, and they were going to leave Splatterhouse out, potentially the most popular TurboGrafx game in the West. I mean, that's crazy, but I'm really glad this is here. If this was the only game this console had, I would still buy it. That's how much of a sucker I am.
Ys Book 1 and 2. Taking advantage of the larger storage capacity of the CD-ROM, this title combines Nihon Falcom's action role-playing games Ys and Ys 2.
I'm excited to play this for the first time, and I think it's great that they're including Turbo CD and even a Super Graphics game here. The CD, not everybody had that. I didn't even know it existed when I was a kid. It didn't sell super well. I mean, later you had the Turbo Duo in the West that was a little bit popular, but I didn't have that. Nobody I knew had that. I barely knew anyone with the TurboGrafx itself, let alone the Turbo CD. So to make that stuff available for people to go back and play is awesome. And to keep it all in one console, not with multiple releases or not charging extra for the games, hats off to Konami for that.
Into a single seamless experience. BONK'S Revenge. Reach the goal by making full use of jumping and headbutting in this side-scrolling comical action game. KADASH. In this fantasy adventure, you can choose from 4 different characters and set on a journey to rescue Princess.
It's funny, sometimes different things spark your memory, and I didn't remember this game by name at all. The visuals, not even particularly, but the music and hearing it in this promo, I do actually remember having this when I was younger. So it's just, you never know what'll take you back and spark a memory. Sometimes it's just hearing a bit of music that you haven't heard in a really long time. I have no idea if this is a good game or not, but it'll be fun to revisit.
ZONK.
Aside from Splatterhouse, this was my next favorite game on TurboGrafx. I love this thing, and I played it later on, I think, the Wii Virtual Console, so I played it as an adult, and it was still challenging. I beat the game, but, I had to struggle to get there. The gameplay is super tight. The visuals are unique. It's got like a weird rockabilly aesthetic, or I guess it's more of like a sci-fi punk aesthetic. It was the sequel, I think, that was rockabilly. I'm getting mixed up, but awesome game, really cool power-ups, cool music, good visuals, and an entirely unique shoot 'em up. Which, shoot 'em ups, I know they're their own genre. I like those games too, but sometimes they can start to run together and look similar. This game didn't look like anything else.
A side-scrolling shooting game set in a futuristic world. NEUTOPIA 2. Soldier Blade, a vertically scrolling sci-fi shooter game with time attack modes called Caravan Stage. Bomberman 93.
And this would be the reason to get the multi-tap. But again, who has 5 friends that want to play Bomberman 93? It's kind of ambitious.
The first game to include both single-player and multiplayer capabilities, where up to 5 players can play against each other. Lords of Thunder. Play as a flying knight, where you get to choose from 4 different elemental armor: fire, earth, water, or wind. The Kung Fu. A side-scrolling beat-em-up game where you take on Kung Fu masters one after another.
Now, this is an example of a game that did have a TurboGrafx release, Karate Master, I think. And I had the game. I remember the music, the visuals, all of that. It definitely had an English release, but they only include the Japanese release. Now, you don't need language to play this game. This is not an RPG. But doesn't that feel kind of lazy? It's from Konami. They already own the license. Just give us the English version of the game that we remember playing with the English artwork.
Jaselken Necromancer, a dark horror fantasy RPG, where the main character and his two...
Good luck playing that without knowing Japanese.
Galaga 88. Defeat Queen Galaga from Planet Galaga.
Creative writing there, guys. But for real, this game is well regarded. Looking forward to playing this. I love Galaga. I have a Galaga arcade one up. Just the original arcade release ROM. And that game's awesome. And I've heard really good things about 88. Looking forward to this.
Dragon Spirit.
Yeah, buddy. This game is fire. And I added the NES version, which is a sequel to this game, to the NES Classic with Heike. And that is my most played game on there. I love this game. And I haven't played the original in a really long time. This is awesome that they included it.
A vertical scrolling shoot 'em up where the player controls a flying dragon. Appare Gateball. A novel sports game based on Gateball, a Japanese variant of croquet. Nectaris. The Japanese version of the full-scale turn-based...
Again, this feels lazy. We already got the English version, Military Madness, and then they're throwing in also the Japanese version. I mean, was this so that, you know, they didn't have to print separate chips for the American or the Western and the Japanese audience? But yet the game lineup is slightly different between the two. So, I mean, actually, they had to produce separate units. So why are we getting the Japanese version of a game we already have in English for an English-speaking audience? It's fine. It's not going to affect anything. It's not, I guess, harmful to have it here. I just don't really understand their reasoning.
Strategy game, Military Madness.
It's literally the same game with a different language.
Dungeon Explorer. The original Japanese version of Dungeon Explorer.
Dungeon Explorer. It's Dungeon Explorer.
NEUTOPIA. The Japanese version of the action role-playing game NEUTOPIA.
All right, so they do this a lot. We're getting a lot of Japanese language versions of games we already have in English.
PC Genji. In PC Genji, go on adventures with the bald caveman Bonk and his comically big, hard as a rock head.
So that's the original Bonk, and given that Bonk was, you know, really the avatar of the TurboGrafx brand, the PC Engine brand, you'd think you'd get all three Bonks in English and Japanese, but you don't. You get Bonk 1 only in Japanese, and I am sure this is fully playable without the English text, so, you know, it's okay, I guess. But again, just a little bit confusing.
The Genji and the Heike clans. In this action game, you play a historical samurai, Taira no Kagekyo, brought back from hell to defeat Minamoto Yoritomo. Super Darius. The console version of Darius, the arcade side-scrolling shooting game masterpiece. Superstar Soldier, the sequel to the popular shooting game Star Soldier. Daima Kaimura, also known as Ghouls and Ghosts, the highly anticipated sequel in the Ghosts and Goblins series. Aldenus, a PC Engine original side-scrolling shoot-'em-up.
I always called this Aldine, so I'm glad, I guess now I know how to actually say it. Looking forward to this. This is expensive to buy, and it's a SuperGrafx game. Mentioned earlier, I've never played a SuperGrafx. I don't know anyone who has or who ever owned one. They didn't make a lot of them, and there were only ever 5 games produced for it. The fact that they would throw in one of the best SuperGrafx games in this Turbo is great.
Seirei Senshi Spriggan, Another classic vertical scrolling shoot 'em up created by a well-known team of game creators. Ninja Ryukenden, a side-scrolling action game known as Ninja Gaiden.
I thought Ninja Gaiden was exclusive to the NES. Didn't know there was ever a version published on TurboGrafx. I love Ninja Gaiden. I think it's one of the great 8-bit era games, and apparently the visuals look a little better on the Turbo, so I'm looking forward to checking this one out.
In the US, where new Hayabusa Spriggan Mark II, a side-scrolling shoot 'em up that depicts the battle between Earth and Mars. Snatcher, a cyberpunk adventure game that follows the mystery of snatchers, androids that are threatening the city.
I feel like they put this one in to troll us. Snatcher was never translated for English as far as I know. It's regarded as a classic game. A lot of people would love to play it. If they're going to put it in here for the English-speaking market and they didn't translate it, I mean, what's the point? Just leave it off. It's a super CD-ROM game, and you know the universe of TurboGrafx had so many different versions. You had the Turbo CD or the Super CD that you needed the extra special arcade card to support. It was all very confusing. And yet they're providing this to play it on just a plug-and-play hardware. So for that, bravo, awesome. But you couldn't translate some text so that a whole new audience could enjoy Snatcher? It just seems crazy to me. And of all the games that aren't available in English on the Turbo Mini, this one is, I think, the one that's offensive.
Akumajo Dracula X Chi no Rando.
Yeah, buddy, this is what we wanted. When they announced this, you know, there was a lot of talk about Splatterhouse, some of the other classics, but Rondo of Blood is the game people wanted. There weren't other ways to play this. I know I've never played this. I played Dracula X on Super Nintendo, which is similar, but never played Rondo of Blood. Can't wait.
A classic title from the side-scrolling gothic horror action Castlevania series. Bomberman 94. The classic battle action game. You can play on your own or battle it up with up to 5 players. Bomberman Panic Bomber, an exciting puzzle game from the Bomberman world. Connect falling tiles in rows of 3 or more to erase them. If your screen piles up, it's game over.
Whatever happened to these head-to-head puzzle games? You had Street Fighter 2 Puzzle League or something that was pretty cool. You had Tetris Attack, my favorite. You had Dr. Mario. You had this thing. But it's like an entire genre that died out. I used to love these kind of games.
Ginga Fuke Densetsu Sapphire, a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up depicting the saga of an all-women time-traveling police force.
This game was, or is, expensive to buy and collect, so good for them for the releasing this on the Mini, letting this be played by a whole generation of people that never had a chance to play it and don't want to drop a big amount of money to buy the card.
How to play. Just connect an HDMI cable.
Funny enough, this thing looks actually huge. So every other mini console, you know, they always show in the image. They did this with the PlayStation, Nintendo started it, Sega did it, but it's just a hand holding it, so you get the perspective of scale. The TurboGrafx Mini looks gigantic. You need 2 hands to, I mean, this looks really big. And what's interesting is the PC Engine and the core graphics, the Japanese and European consoles that were the equivalent of the Turbo, when they came out way back in the 80s, they were so small. I mean, they were the size of a mini console, basically. And then again, they made the console larger to look cooler. And then again, it's in mini now, but it's still kind of huge. But I don't even care. This thing looks awesome. And what I was worried about was the single controller port. The original only had one controller port. Apparently they thought, you know, no one would have friends, or maybe they knew no one would have a friend who would want to play Turbo because it's such a like a weird console, you know. So they just scratched that and sold you the multi-tap. Well, they are selling you the multi-tap here, but they did give you 2 controller ports, and, you know, good for them. The console looks great. I wonder if this cap will be removable. If you remember from the original Turbo, this is the piece you would pull off and connect attachments. They had a turbo booster that gave you better AV connection. They had the turbo CD that you would connect in the back and then make this thing into a gigantic behemoth of a console. It'd be cool if they'd release some of those attachments like Genesis Mini did with their Tower of Power, and especially because you do get some of the CD games in here, so it would be legitimate to have, you know, the physical presence of the turbo CD. But man, this thing is a monster.
To the TV. You can start playing easily and immediately.
I don't think they show it in this video, but I've seen it in another video Konami put out. When you select the game, it shows it being loaded, and most of them are the Hue cards, so they just slide into this card. But for the CD titles, it shows a CD, and then this imagery transforms into the CD-ROM. So pretty neat attention to detail. Got some animation in the background, getting a view immediately of how many players can participate, and you've got your save states represented as TurboGrafx. So pretty cool. And then you can pick the PC Engine label. If you select that, then that's how you swap over to the PC Engine games. And it's branded accordingly. You get the imagery of the PC Engine. So they're giving you a shortcut on the controller to basically affect the menu of the console. You save it by hitting select and run, and I'm sure that takes you back out to the console menu. That was something when the NES Mini was hacked. It was one of the early additions, was the option, just the option with your controller to go back to the menu. Now, honestly, I kind of liked having to go to the console to hit reset. I don't think that's a popular perspective. I think people want to be able to make that choice with their controller without having to get up. I get it. It just felt a little bit more authentic. I mean, you used to have to get up and go to the console to swap out games. So it's still kind of affecting that action. And I don't know, maybe that's lame, but it felt more authentic. But they've added that here for the TurboGrafx, and I completely get why, because so many people complained that Nintendo didn't do this.
Your games at any time.
The save menu looks great. We've got a slot here for the Hue cards, and when you have a save, it will populate. You will have an image of the game.
Display modes to choose from. You can choose HD size, of course, or a mode.
Let me take this moment to note the Sega Mini background borders looked like trash. They look so bad. They would have been better off just leaving it off altogether and doing what the NES did, and you just get black in the background. That's it.
Mode that reproduces the scanning lines of CRT televisions for that retro feel.
Those scan lines to me don't look very good. I mean, look how much darker the image just got.
Televisions for that retro feel.
M2 did the emulation. It's the same shop that did the emulation for the Genesis Mini. Great company. They do really good work. But they fumbled on the CRT scan lines for the Genesis Mini. It basically just put some black lines on, made it darker. They didn't brighten the image to accommodate all that black that's on screen. It looks like they've done the same thing here. I mean, this CRT filter does not look very good. That's okay by me. I don't use the CRT filters, but a lot of people do, and I don't understand why that's so hard to get right. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like, and remember to subscribe if you want to see more content from us. We'll keep you posted on TurboGrafx news and other video game related stuff. Catch you later, guys.